So in continuing our discussion pertaining to variables, we have the second general type of variable, which is the quantitative variable. Okay? So for instance, we have the variable length, or we have the characteristic length. Okay? So another one, let's say we have another example. Let's say we have the characteristic temperature. Okay, so let us try to list down some possible values for these two variables. So, in length, the possible values can be expressed in different metric system. It can be in the form of inches, kilometers, meters, okay, etc., etc. So, let's say we use the metric meter, or we use the unit meter. So, we can infer that a certain length can be 1 meter, it can be 100 meter, let's say 20 meters, or let's say 43 meters, and so on and so forth. Okay? In temperature, okay, we can easily say that it is hot, warm, or cold. Okay? So, these are some possible values for temperature. However, these possible values are actually qualitative in nature because they are expressed in words. But temperature can also be expressed with the following, or let's say it can be also expressed in numerical values in which we can use some units like Celsius, Kelvin, Fahrenheit, and Rankine. Okay? So, these are some possible values or possible units to be used in temperature. So, let's say for instance, some possible value of temperature using the unit of Celsius is, let's say, negative 20 degrees Celsius. Let's say 25 degrees Celsius. Let's say we have 100 degrees Celsius, and etc., etc. So, meaning to say, okay, from these ideas, how do we define quantitative variables? Okay? So, with this example, let's take a look at this one. The length actually is measured with units. So, it gave out possible values of 1, 100, 20, and 43. So, meaning to say, quantitative variable, or meaning to say length is a quantitative variable. In temperature, we have qualitative variables for temperature like hot, warm, and cold. However, this hot, warm, and cold can also be expressed in numbers, as we can see in our example. Okay? We express it in negative 20 degrees Celsius, 25 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Celsius. And also, it has different units like Celsius, Kelvin, Fahrenheit, and Rankine. Okay? So, meaning to say, quantitative variables rather, okay, quantitative variables, these are variables expressed mainly, okay, in numerical forms. Numerical forms. By just taking a look at this example, they are expressed in numbers, in quantities. Okay? And meaning to say, when a number is expressed in quantities, numbers are what? Meaningful or meaningless? Okay. Obviously, numbers have meanings already. Why? Because we can measure distances already. Okay? Or let's say we can measure amounts already. So, numbers have meanings. So, let's say we have 1 meter, 100 meter, and 20 meters. So, what would be the longest length? Obviously, it is the 100 meters. And the shortest length would be the 1 meter. So, we can identify differences. Okay, we can identify inequalities in between the possible values. That is why numbers have meanings. They are not used to identify names. they are used to identify amounts, okay, and quantities. So, meaning to say, if quantitative variables are expressed mainly in numerical forms, in which these numerical forms have meanings already, how do we obtain the data? How do we obtain the possible values for quantitative variables? So, in quantitative variables, we obtain the data through the use of what? Through measurement. Okay? Through measurement. Okay? So, let's have another example of quantitative variable. Let's say, we have the variable number of bowling pins in a certain bowling arena. So, the number of bowling pins, let's say the remaining bowling pins in an arena can be 9, can be 3, can be 5, whatsoever. So, how do we obtain data or how do we obtain these possible values? We do not measure it, right? Why? Because we do not have units. Okay, we only use measurement when we have units like this one. However, in identifying the possible values of bowling pins or the number of bowling pins, we do not have units. So, we gather data through the use of or through the method of counting. So, meaning to say, quantitative variables are those variables expressed in numerical forms in which these numerical forms have meanings already. And the data or the possible values in quantitative variables are obtained through measurement and counting. So, these are the two main types of variables. So, we have qualitative and quantitative. Okay? So, with this idea or with this knowledge, we are now ready to proceed with the classification of variables according to continuity of values. And that is discrete and continuous variables.